Oi oi Savaloy, it's your boy, your old mucker Jack Slack. Fights Gone By Podcast episode 132, coming at you on the 18th of April 2019. It's a midweek poddy, which means we've got some fights to preview this weekend, which is good fun. Some of them good, some of them not so good, some of them blatant gimmies. And I know you're thinking I'm talking about Tenshin Nasukawa, but I'm actually talking about Islam Makhachev getting some lad you've never heard of in Russia. And Pavlovich as well is getting a 6-2 lad who's lost his last two. But we'll talk all about that in a minute. I'm going to slag those events off properly. But news first, sad news, Angela Magana is in a coma. She had to get an operation on some nerve compression in her back or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, pretty eerie because she had an aunt who didn't recover from anaesthetic. And there's like a video of her in her surgical gown and cap saying to someone off camera, like, oh, I'm worried I won't wake up from this. And as of the time of recording, she hasn't woken up, which is very sad, especially if she's got a kid. So sending out my best wishes to Angela Magana. What else has happened? Let's have some lighter news. Oh, Burt Watson's starting an MMA promotion because it's apparently 2008 again, and we're all starting MMA promotions. This seems like a good way to get rich. Someone needs to tell Burt Watson that Bare Knuckle is the new MMA in terms of rinky-tink promoters. But his apparently it's going to be called MMA Live, but the production company is called We Rollin' MMA, which is just cashing in on your one meme as hard as possible. Can't help but feel like Burt would have been better off doing this, 3 or 4 years ago when he left the UFC. But fair enough. And then Leslie Smith signed with Bellator, which is interesting enough because she is one of those difficult fighters, or rather a fighter who's sort of got a cross-marked against them because she's so involved with efforts to unionize fighters, which is good, in my opinion. I think there should be a fighters union. Most people who follow the sport and actually look at the payout figures and things do think, yeah, they should be paid a lot more, and there should be some way of them making it so that they get paid a lot more, and unionization is pretty much, or rather forming an association, is pretty much the way that would probably happen. Problem is that fighting is a sport full of dudes who are like, well, I'm going to be the next Conor McGregor. I don't know about these guys. I actually get like 3 emails a week from people being like, love your podcast, you've helped me so much, by the way, I'm going to be the next Conor McGregor. Literally, the Filthy Casuals Guides really kicked off last week, or the week before, or whatever it was, and I was getting comments like, yes, Conor McGregor's style is quite a lot like mine. I suppose it's because I was inspired to take up MMA because of him. It's like, what? Oh. But back to Leslie Smith, yeah, so, someone... Actually, I'm going to read you the best comment that I saw on it on Reddit, which was, can't wait to hear how fighting with almost no regulations on Indian reservations and states with small commissions and a 5k and 5k contract is somehow better for fighters than the UFC. Sadly, Teach the Jug did not appear and tell us all how actually there's a lot of locker room bonuses and things. But, yeah, Scott Coker has positioned himself as like the guy who goes, I'm pro-fighter, and then pays fighters really badly. And they're allowed their sponsors, but the thing about the sponsors on the shorts was that the sponsors wanted to be seen on a UFC broadcast. Nobody really gives a shit about being seen on a Bellator broadcast. In 2019, God knows what they think about the UFC in this year, but, certainly the bubble has sort of burst on that. Rory McDonald and Benson Henderson have both said that they had trouble getting sponsors, or at least didn't have as much success with sponsors as they thought they would. But yeah, I mean, it's a fair price for wearing your own shorts, which is awesome. But then if you don't get your own special shorts made, what's the point? And final piece of news, Charles Oliveira versus Nick Lentz has been signed, which seems like a weird one. I feel like Charles Oliveira should be in a better position than Nick Lentz. But I think Charles Oliveira is on a 4-fight win streak and Nick Lentz is on a 2-fight win streak. But Charles Oliveira fights often and loses like 1 in every 5. So he's never really, he's on the cusp of being great all the time. If he just took a little bit longer between fights, those losses would come further apart and maybe he'd be near the title, but he's not. He's awesome though, incredible. He owns the submission record now, doesn't he? So we'll jump into the previews now. We've got some fights going on this weekend. We've got a UFC event, the UFC event in Russia. The same way that the UFC event in Ireland and everything else that they've ever had a big star and they go, we might go to so-and-so. If you believe that they're taking Khabib to Russia, aside from to sit cage side at this event, if you believed that they were taking him to fight in Russia or McGregor to fight in Croke Park, you're an idiot, because it's a pay-per-view business and all your buyers are in America. And if you put the pay-per-view on at a time that would be like 4 a.m. for them or whatever, it's not going to work. So you can do the other thing that they did with Bisping versus Henderson, because they realised nobody gave a shit about that fight anyway, except for Michael Bisping and Dan Henderson, and a few shit-eating wild men in Manchester who would turn up to watch a fight at 4 a.m. local time. So they started that fight at 4 a.m. so that they could show it at pay-per-view in America, and still almost no one bought it. So, but yeah, no, it's a pay-per-view business. Anytime you hear UFC looking to expand into Hawaii, don't think, oh yeah, Max Holloway title fight. Think maybe they poached Alima McFarlane. Actually, no, she's a champion, so no. Kendall Grove comes back to main event a fight night card, probably. Or BJ Penn. God, kill me. Actually, a lot of bad stuff about BJ Penn came out last week, but we're not going to bother with that. It did give me an excuse to get out my favourite GIF of all time, which every time I remember this GIF exists, I just laugh uncontrollably for about half a minute, and then I have to go and look it up and I laugh for another minute. It's great. The BJ Penn GIF where he's standing in his corner before the fight, and his corner try and move that banner in, and they're like pushing it against the side of his head, and he doesn't notice, and then he goes, and looks at it, and then they finally get it in behind him. But it's just, I'm not selling it, but it's the best GIF I've ever seen. So anyway, we're going to Russia, is the takeaway from that little discussion, and rather than Khabib Nurmagomedov headlining, you got Alexei Oleinik, and Islam Makhachev, and Sergey Pavlovich, and Ivan Shitrov, if you've ever heard of him. And then Antonina Shevchenko, because, near enough. So main event is Alistair Overeem versus Alexei Oleinik. This is, I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, Alexei Oleinik shouldn't be as good as he is, but he is as good as he is because it's heavyweight. He's the Derek Lewis of submissions. If you watch him try and strike, like he's got his left arm out and he's throwing his right uppercut at the same time, and he's leaning deep off to his right side, he still hits people because, it's heavyweight and everyone's bad. But he is really bad to watch on the feet. Where Alistair Overeem is a guy who probably, in the heavyweight division, I would say probably the most skilled in each area of the game, striking, clinch, groundwork, overall, of maybe any heavyweight ever. Now, that's high praise, but it also comes with the trade-off. If we're playing Darkest Dungeon and he's got negative attributes, they are sometimes just coming in really scared of his opponent for, no reason. Not at all scared of Mark Hunt, just took Mark Hunt apart, but terrified of Ben Rothwell for some reason. And Sergey Haratanov, even after beating him once. Those fights where he just doesn't look like he wants to engage at all, throws a weird right hand overhead while stepping, and then tries to run in the opposite direction. And those are the ones where you watch him at the start and you go, oh, he's getting knocked out here. That's what's going to happen. And then he'll come back with a fight against Mark Hunt or Junior Dos Santos, genuinely very dangerous people, be absolutely cool, calm, and collected and just take them apart. So possibly the most skilled in all areas, but has a habit of shitting the bed mentally. And also his chin is not up to snuff at heavyweight. And understandable if you're getting hit by 250-pound monsters, but within that division there are good chins. There are people who can take a great hit at heavyweight, and Overeem is not one of them. And he has a tendency to, he's going to get hit at some point, and he has a tendency to sort of fold when that happens. But, I mean, Alistair Overeem's an open book by now. You know what he does. You know what he can do, what he's capable of, and what he can't do. So he had 2 losses and he got that. The Pavlovich fight was such a gimme. I mean, Pavlovich was undefeated at the time, but if you saw him fight, he is not on the level of top heavyweights. The Pavlovich fight was kind of like everything you wanted from Overeem. He has the best clinch knees and stepping knees in MMA, probably ever. That maybe Ramba Somdet, because he was actually a Muay Thai champion. But Overeem, actually, if he hits you with one, there's a great chance that he's going to, puncture your lung or something. And what I've wanted to see for ages is just Overeem moving people to the fence, like he did to Travis Brown, getting his head under theirs, getting either the overhook or the underhook, and then the wrist control or the bicep control, bicep tie rather, and then stepping back, posting with the head, stepping off to the side a little bit, loading up that knee, bringing it up to the solar plexus or one of the floating ribs. And I think he could just maul people like that. And he's been doing it intermittently throughout his career. He did it to Travis Brown and then walked onto that face kick. Did it to Mark Hunt, and then Mark Hunt, because Mark Hunt's like a foot shorter than him, Overeem just brought the knee right up to the head and knocked him out. But against Pavlovich, he was doing a lot of like holding him off on the fence and kneeing him in the gut, which I really liked. Decent ground and pound from the guard. But in that loss to Curtis Blades, you saw him on the bottom and he was having trouble there. Doing some interesting things, kept attacking a knee reap from half guard. He'd push Blades' face up from like the knee shield half guard and then throw his hooking leg over and start trying to attack the heel hook, which you'll typically see guys do. You'll see guys go for that reap or the single leg X guard from butterfly half guard more, because you have the other foot in. Whereas if you do it from knee shield half guard, you have this sort of awkward situation where you've got to try and get that leg back in. But he was doing it well, and now him and Curtis Blades are apparently training together. My boy Sean from Elevation was telling me that Overeem's going to win this one by stepping knee. But it's Overeem. There's every chance that he shits the bed. The thing about Oleinik is that he should be a sitting target for kicks, because he doesn't really kick very well, and he has to close the range to throw his hands. I mean, he's got an 80-inch reach, but to get in and hit you, he actually has to close that distance. Mark Hunt brutalized his leg with like 3 kicks. Overeem probably kicks about as hard as Mark Hunt. Will be able to kick that lead leg. But Overeem also likes to throw front kicks to the body. Love watching him do those. Might do a crane kick to the head, because Oleinik has a tendency to dip way down to his right side whenever he's shown anything. So expect kicks and knees. If Overeem's got his head in the game, expect weird jogging in the wrong direction if he's not. And expect when Oleinik closes in to try and get a clinch or a takedown, Overeem will probably post his head or dig underhooks and then knee the shit out of him. I think, Oleinik, his chances are in either knocking Overeem down with a hillbilly haymaker or scrambly low single like he did against Hunt. I think he came in on a clinch and then he dropped on the low single as Hunt was defending the takedown, and Hunt sort of turned his back to get out, and Oleinik just followed him up onto the back. I mean, you can never write off a guard pull Ezekiel, but there's Junior Albini and there's Alistair Overeem, I mean, I would love to torrent a career pack of Oleinik, because he has some amazing submissions on his record. Neck cranks and Ezekiel's, and didn't he finish Krokop with a chest compressor? That's hilarious. But yeah, he's beaten some really... Well, he's done some very surprising things. I would pay to watch him against Josh Barnett, just to see those like submission styles match up. But Barnett probably cage box him into oblivion. Barnett going to Bellator. Can't wait for that. That's the only Bellator heavyweight I'm excited about at the moment. After Vitaly Minakov came back from his sabbatical fighting scrubs on the European circuit, looking like Nicky Krills did in his first fight back, like no idea what he's doing. But Nicky Krills came back and beat the crap out of Ovin Simprou last weekend, which I didn't touch on. That was good fun. So moving on this card, Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. Well, I don't know much about Tsarukyan, except that he's the 140th best MMA lightweight fighter, according to Tapology. Coming in on a good streak of wins, hasn't lost since his second professional fight. Good number of knockouts and submissions, but Makhachev is a really well-rounded guy, and they're always raving about him at AKA, saying like he's their best rounded fighter and so on. Hits decently, he nuked Gleison Tebow, caught him on one leg kicking, and Tebow hit the mat head first, which was rough, back of the head right on the mat, and then took like 2 more punches as well. But also a very good grappler. He took down Kajan Johnson the other day, another fighter who was part of Project Spearhead or whatever it is, another unionization effort. It doesn't help that all these unionizing fighter attempts bitch about each other. John Fitch was bitching about Leslie Smith a little while ago. But that Makhachev Johnson fight was great fun, because Makhachev took him down. I think it was against the fence, and he tipped him onto his side for like a smash pass, smashing the knees together. Managed to get to mount, spun into the armbar, and then the armbar break he did was so slick. It was like he had the arm and then he released the leg over the face, changed the grip, came back over the face with the leg, and then fell back into the armbar. It was nice. We don't see a lot of triangles at a high level, but we don't see a lot of armbars at a high level because, firstly, as we said, no one's hitting submissions from the bottom anymore. But to hit a submission, to hit an armbar from the top, you have to commit. There's a danger that you're going to lose top position. A lot of dudes would rather just sit in mount and elbow. And by a lot of dudes, I mean sensible people, but Makhachev was confident and he just went for it. Obviously, there are exceptions. It's best to go for things like an armbar from Matt in like the last sort of 30 seconds, 40 seconds of a round. You have your corner shout to you like when there's a minute left or whatever, and you just try and rip their arm off in like the last 40 seconds. Because if they get on top, what's the worst that can happen? You should be able to defend yourself from closed guard for 30, 40 seconds. So I get the sense they're setting Makhachev up for a win here. He's going to be like the hometown fighter, because there's a great chance that Oleinik gets stopped in the main event. But, it'd be great if Oleinik wins. Sergey Pavlovich versus Marcelo Golm. If you've seen Golm fight before, he's a young heavyweight. There's not a lot special about him. How old is he? He's only 26. And, he picked up a quick win in his first fight in the UFC back in 2017. And since then, he's lost 2 by decision. Timothy Johnson. Oh my god, I forgot Timothy Johnson even existed. He's gone to Bellator now, hasn't he? And then Arjan Bula. So no one really special. Whereas Sergey Pavlovich was coming in undefeated, but obviously got beat up by Overeem. It was Mr. Gimme 2018. It was a contest between him and Blagoy Ivanov. But Sergey did beat Kirill, baby Fedor. So, there's that. Do you know what? I don't give a fuck about that fight, so let's not do anything more about it. And then the rest of this card is like Devin Clark versus, fuck that. Antonina Shevchenko, Valentina's little sister or big sister. They're putting her in against Roxanne Modafferi. Roxy's well ranked, but her striking is horrible. So, if Antonina can stop the takedowns, expect check hooks galore or missed check hooks galore, whichever you prefer. They had them out on the stage doing their open workout together, and they were just like synchronizing back kicks and stuff. Someone sent me this and was like, who enjoys this? And I was like, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of morons who are in love with the Shevchenko sisters and just fawn over this shit. Comment below if you're a moron who fawns over this shit. Yep, Christoph Jotko's around. I didn't even know he was still in the game. Yeah, this car... Oh, Marcin Tybura is relegated to the Fight Pass prelims or whatever the prelims are now. That's sad. I remember having to write an article about him being like, I'm not super impressed, but... He is winning at heavyweight. He could be the next thing. But it turns out he's just a big thing. Another big thing. And by big, I just mean flabby. Did just decision Stefan Struve, though. So, enough of that shit. Let's talk Rizin, baby. And I'm back. To suit the switch from Western event to Oriental, I've changed from English breakfast tea to Lapsang Souchang. Or... fish tea, if you've never enjoyed a Lapsang Souchang. It's a smoky tea, so it smells a bit like smoked salmon or something like that. Oh, it's also just taken all the skin off my tongue. Well, no point tasting anything now. But then if I have no taste, let's talk Japanese MMA. Way! I'm gonna have so many angry weebs in the comments. Rizin 15, weird order of card. But I suppose that reflects the fact that the card, well, certainly what Mr. Rizin on RMMA was saying was like, the Japanese don't believe that the main event is the main event. It's like WrestleMania, there's 5 main events. And you're like, no, what goes on last is the main event, mate. What is it they say on OSW? 5 main events, aka no main event. But the main event of this card is Mo Lawal versus Jiri, my boy Jiri, for the light heavyweight title, which is shit, to be honest, because you've got Muhammad Lawal, who is dropped off a cliff. Like, we've given up hope of him realising his potential. Firstly, he lost to Krokop. He's the big name that lost to Krokop recently. Like, that was the thing propping up Krokop's return run. He decisioned a fat Quinton Jackson. Then he got knocked out in 15 seconds by Ryan Bader, and then knocked out in 50 seconds by Liam Aguirre. So, washed confirmed. However, he did beat Jiri back in 2015 in Rizin. Apparently, they still care about him in Rizin. Meanwhile, Jiri, who is always fun, mainly because he changes his hairstyle every week, but he's actually gone from strength to strength since he beat Mo Lawal. He knocked out the ghost of Kazuyuki Fujita in a fight that made us all sick. Beat Mark Tenios. He beat a load of people you've never heard of, except Carl Albrechtsen, who is fighting on Rizin and then fighting 20 days later in KSW. Thank God for no medical suspensions, eh? He could get horribly knocked out and still fight there. Beat Jake Hoon, beat Brandon Halsey. Oh yeah, Brandon Halsey, that was a weird-ass fight. Another fight confirming how bad the ring is. But it was a unique way I saw Brandon Halsey use the ring shittily. he got caught in a guillotine and he decided to drag himself backwards towards the ropes and sit through them so that the ropes took the jury off him. It was pretty amazing. If you need more confirmation that the ring is shit, check out Datzik's return fight. He's 350 pounds now. He fought some lad who was like 80 kilos. What's that, 170, 180 pounds? And he like escaped an armbar in the corner, he was leaning on him like he was a cushion backwards in the corner, and the other guy, his head and feet are out different sides of the ring, and Datzik's trying to throw back elbows at his head while leaning back on him, while reclining on him. But yeah, if Jiri can pull that off, good on him. I have a feeling like if Molawal fights smart, he could just take Jiri down and pound the snot out of him, to be honest. But that's the state of your light heavyweight division. They're putting a title on that. Co-main is Tenshin versus Fritz Aldin Biagatan, or Fritz Biagatan. But I went out, I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt. I've always said, why are Rizin so opposed to just having Tenshin kickbox against a good kickboxer? And it turns out it's because they've signed like 3 good kickboxers. So they got Tenshin and Tiger, and they got Tiger going on in the first fight of the night. So I presume they're going to like build towards Tenshin versus Tiger, maybe. I don't. We can hope, because that would be a good fight, because then you've got a point of reference with Takeru, but instead they're always, Tenshin, we'd like you to fight in MMA, and then he's like, no. So they go, okay, we'll give you an MMA fighter in kickboxing gloves as part of a kickboxing tournament or some shit. It's really weird, and you're like, why? Tenshin Asakawa is a very, very good fighter. I've picked on the weebs for like marking out over him cartwheel kicking bums in Rizin, or MMA fighters with 1 kickboxing match or whatever. But he's legitimately one of the best strikers in the bantamweight division worldwide, and still like 19 years old. Persona protagonist, getting together with his friends to kill a god. But why not show him off against really... Well, I suppose the whole point is that they want him to be like a god, Like the Kyoji fight was good. That was good fun. But still, against an MMA fighter for no reason. It was like Masato used to just... Once a year, he'd take a fight against an MMA fighter and get his yearly stoppage and then go back to decisioning dudes all the time. I say that as someone who loved Masato. It's super weird. I mean, obviously padding the highlight reel, but at what point do people say, yeah, I don't need to see him fight this random dude from the Philippines? I mean, the dude won a WBC Muay Thai title, but there are so many Muay Thai titles out there at different weights, and I think it's only a national one or something like that. But anyway, he won a WBC Muay Thai title, and quote from his from the article announcing this fight, guy said, Tenshin is a very talented and undefeated kickboxer, but he has not fought any Filipinos yet. Which is just a great way to invalidate someone's accomplishments. Be like, I'm not sold on him till he's fought some Filipinos. So yeah, just a strange fight. Expect Tenshin to beat the shit out of this lad. And if he gets in trouble at any point, expect him to Rolling Thunder and use it to buy time. That's the lamest thing in the world. It's really hacked me off. Because I used to love the Rolling Thunder, like when Peter Graham was doing it. But once you realise that Tenshin does it to get a breather, it becomes really obvious. And it also becomes really obvious that the Japanese refs are just like letting him get a breather. Who was the lad he double-legged? He double-legged Rod Tang. And the Japanese ref was just like, go on, stand up very slowly. Check gloves very slowly. I mean, but it's still Tenshin, so you'll get a nice knockout out of it. To his credit, Tenshin rarely goes to decision, even with very, very good strike. Kyoji Horiguchi versus Ben 10, that's your actual main event there, mate. You've got a top 10 flyweight versus a top 10 flyweight at, what? It's at 132, according to Tapology. Japanese, it'll be kilos, won't it? It'll be whatever kilos. He says in a country that uses the metric system, but only sort of, which is why we're leaving the EU. I really like this fight. Because Kyoji... It's interesting because both of them have had sort of like their difficulties in the grappling. What difficulties Kyoji has had, he only lost the one fight against DJ, which is, as good as he's going to get. And it was so long ago that he's come a good old way since then. But he used to have this problem where he gave up his back all the time. Like, even to guys he was mauling, he'd just he'd miss a left hook and then go, uh-oh, they're on my back. Better stand against the fence for a while and lose that round. Ben 10 had trouble with GCF Formiga and then Wilson Hayes. Now, the GCF Formiga one really cemented to me that he's actually pretty slick on the ground, even though he's, they always say things like, brown belt in jiu-jitsu or whatever, but you're not talking like regular brown belt. You're talking world-class fighter. So he's pretty good on the ground. If you can get out from underneath Formiga as he's trying to mount you, you're good. The thing that I did notice about Ben 10 is that in a change from things from like, I saw, he burst onto the scene beating Jules the Jackal because it was such a malicious fight. You had the guy with the scary tattoos doing the obnoxious stare down head on head thing against the affable Asian chap who really didn't seem like he wanted to do that. And then the affable Asian chap just knocks him out easy. But that was one where he was moving forward, moving his head, and just coming back with counter punches while on offense, which I really liked. But in recent fights, he's really been going... It's kind of like formulaic, to be honest. It's got to the point where you can pretty much tell it's coming. He steps left, steps right, bounces a little bit, and then he throws a high kick and comes in with punches behind it. He's quick. He's very quick, but he tries to sort of overwhelm people in these flurries. And it gave Jussier Formiga takedowns. And Jussier Formiga also chinned him off it with a good right hand. And then the end of that fight was when Jussier Formiga took the kick, expecting Ben 10 to move in after it. He'll kick and then with like his right leg shift into a left punch, or he'll kick with his left leg and come down into a right hand. But Formiga catches the kick and spins into a back fist, knocks him down like forearm on neck, and then takes his back and chokes him. But Ben was pretty much out already. I've seen fights where he doesn't do this, but in his most recent ones, he does. Against Tim Elliott, too. Kick, enter with punches, kick, enter with punches. You can sort of set your watch by it. And I think against Koji Horiguchi, that'll get you chinned. If you watch his fight with Manel Kape, there are some beautiful right hands that he lands straight down the center when Manel Kape's kicking. And he sends him flying through the air because it's such a reliable time to hit someone. Not only are they locked in place by being on one foot, there's not a lot of flex in their position. You can't really roll with a punch while on one leg. And also, if you're getting hit on one leg, it's like getting hit while you're crossing your feet. Maybe you're not as hurt as you could be, maybe you're still with it, but you are going to lose your footing because you've been hit while you're on one leg or out of balance. I'd be interested to see if Ben 10 can make this into a scrappy one. I feel like the more he stays on Horiguchi, the harder it will be for Horiguchi to make distance and land the counter punches or to burst in and land the leads. Horiguchi really likes to work, bounce at distance, enter, murder, out. That's, if you look at him or either of them cheaters or someone like that, the point style karate guys, very low output in terms of numbers, but they make them matter. So I'd be interested to see if getting past that first intercept encounter or whatever, if Ben 10 can stay on him and keep throwing combinations, much like that Jules the Jackal fight or the Tim Elliott fight. If he can stay in on him and start throwing combinations, I'd be interested to see if he can overwhelm Horiguchi. The other thing is, Rizin recently began allowing elbows. Krokop stopped some guy at Rizin 13 with elbows. That was back in September. But yeah, I think they're allowing them in most of their fights now. And Ben 10 is good with elbows, especially out of the clinch. Sliced Jussier Formiga open, but very good on those breaking elbows from the clinch. So if he can get some clinches and start elbowing Horiguchi on the break, I can't recall seeing anyone really rough Horiguchi up in the clinch, but I can't recall seeing Horiguchi end up in the clinch that often. The Olga Kubo fight was really more Olga Kubo diving after his legs, Horiguchi sprawling, and then the two returning to the feet. Should have made a casual's guide to Horiguchi. That would have been easy, and then there would be no UFC copyright issues with that one either, which would be nice. But I didn't, so fuck that. He was in the Gunnar Nelson one because we were talking about the bounce. I love the bounce into the left hook that he's doing now. Also the bounce into the lead leg skipping knee, which I've still never been able to actually do properly. I spent ages in front of a bag trying to work that one out, but it's fucking tricky. So yeah, I'm actually genuinely very interested in this one, because there's not a huge amount... Well, actually, the best thing about the UFC flyweight division falling apart is that we're getting... Horiguchi himself can be built up as a brand. He's the most legit fighter in Rizin. He's probably... Him and DJ are the most legitimate fighters, and Musashi are the most legitimate fighters outside of the UFC. Certainly the best. There's lots of legitimate fighters, but certainly the best fighters outside the UFC. Horiguchi is probably the best fighter, technically, all around, that Japan's ever produced at this point. Damn right they should be making a big deal out of him. And we all dream of the one Rizin crossover where we get the Horiguchi-DJ rematch. I appreciate how many people don't treat that as a foregone conclusion, because the first fight was ridiculously premature. Luis Gardano straight into Demetrius Johnson. It was the height of that sausage factory, make fights for DJ, don't care about the rest of the division sort of thing. And Horiguchi himself, a week before the fight was announced and he accepted it, said, no, I'm not ready for DJ yet. then he was in the match with DJ. And he did good on the feet because he was good on the feet, but he's got better on the feet now and he can actually grapple. Because I think that was before he even got to American Top Team, wasn't it? Anyway, what else is on that card? Oh, Satoshi is fighting Roberto Satoshi, or Roberto de Souza. Very skilled Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor. Famous for the very, very long, low single. He'll dive after dudes' ankles. But he's fighting Satoru Kitaoka. Satoshi is currently undefeated. He's 7-0. But, not fought a great many knowable names, whereas Satoru Kitaoka has fought everyone. He's this weird, stocky grappler dude with more cauliflower ear than head at this point. And he's always interesting. Like, actually, someone's sent a question later asking about interesting characters in the ring, and I think Kitaoka is one of them. He's got submissions by just about everything you can imagine. Guillotines, heel hooks, straight ankles, He's done a lot of submitting people over the years. Through Pancrase and Dream and Deep. Loses when he fights the best, but is still capable of surprising. I mean, he just beat Kawajiri, which... Kawajiri is sort of a sad state now, but he beat Darren Cruikshank back at Rizin... When was that? Rizin... Whatever the 2016 Grand Prix was. You got Carl Albrechtsen versus Cristiano Froelich. Meh. You got Rina Kubota, who's 7-2 and very well regarded. She's really come along in the MMA. But they've matched her against some 3-5 lass from France. Who's ranked number 53 of women in her division in the UK and Ireland. So really not a notable name. Hasn't won a fight since 2017, hadn't won a fight before that since 2015. Basically, you're looking at Rena hitting this lass in the body, her going fetal, weebs losing their minds over it on Twitter. I don't make predictions often, but that's a solid one. Take that one to the bank. And the sad loss from this card is that we don't get Justin Scoggins versus Asakura anymore. That was an exciting little one. Asakura, really fun guy, come up. Most of his fights have been in Rizin, I think. I think he was like 2-0 when he got there. Can't remember, but he smashed my boy, Saiga. Had some interesting fights up to now, and allegedly Scoggins was asking for a title to be put on this fight, which, not unreasonable if you consider that they're putting a title on King Mo's fight. But, yeah, Scoggins has mysteriously pulled out with an injury, so we don't get that one, sadly. I mean, that's basically it. There's not a lot of exciting stuff on that card, but between the two cards, there should be enough going on to keep you interested this weekend. Now let's do some questions. Hi Jack, what are some kickboxing or boxing counters and combinations that you could switch out hooks and uppercuts with horizontal or vertical elbows? Could the Ross Pearson cross counter and inside slip left hook be modified to use elbows instead? What about Roberto Duran's extremely short uppercuts from all the various ties in the clinch? Would these be affected? Also, here's a PDF of the Rocky Marciano book. Not sure if you knew this existed. From Landon. I told you, Landon, I'd answer your question. Cheers for that. Loved the Rocky Marciano book. It's so 1950s it hurts. But, yeah, if you want to watch some interesting combinations with elbows thrown in, there are some great videos of Nathan Corbett on the pads. And Nathan Corbett is a guy who got really famous for using his elbows in Muay Thai. So famous, in fact, Tyrone Spong would only agree to defend his World Muay Thai Championship against Nate Corbett if they ruled out elbows, which is stunning. Why would you have a Muay Thai fight without elbows? So that's the level we're talking, and no one ever talks about that. We're all like, Tyrone Spong, yeah, amazing fighter. But yeah, crazy that they banned elbows for that fight. And then when they had their rematch, it was in Glory, so no elbows at all, no clinch work, no nothing. But with elbows, Carnage was awesome. And there's some great videos of him on YouTube working pads and mitts, and he does some really interesting switch shots into elbows. And his philosophy, if you ever hear him talk about it, was elbows hurt more than punches, and I liked boxing, so I just learned to put elbows into boxing. He had some great little combinations. I mean, there's lots of basic ones like the jab into stepping upward left elbow. So you jab and then you step deep and lift your lead elbow up. And that one works nicely because either if they're stepping in, you slam your elbow into their face, you cut them open. Or if they're punching at the time, you've got your arm up as like a shield, that little forearm block, the Dustin Poirier. But that's a great one in boxing. You lift your forearm up, you come back with the short right hand, the pull cue straight to the nose. So it puts you in good counterpunching position too if you go in with that. What else is nice? Folding elbows are obviously the elbow of choice. I like the pairing of the jab and the lead folding elbow, as Rory Mack did. He would flick out his jab a few times. Guys would have their right hand coming in, to parry the jab, and he would like put his jab into their palm and then turn the elbow over, stepping in behind it and elbow around their hand. Did that to Woodley, did it to a couple of other people too. He gave Woodley nightmares with his jab. Don't see enough elbows from the upward elbows from the collar tie. Or upward or like sort of straight in, but upward elbows. If you watch Willie Pep versus Sandy Sadler, which is a boxing match, Sandy Sadler grabs him behind the head and deliberately misses these uppercuts to slice Willie Pep's face with these elbows. It's like, whoa, I've missed, and then you smash the elbow through afterwards. And no one ever asks, why is your elbow further forward if you're throwing an uppercut? But upward elbows are underused, but also tricky because they work best when the opponent's running onto them. It's such a short strike, you really struggle to get in range to do it. It's hard to step in with upward elbows and be sure of landing. It's really more of like a cover. I like the back elbow out of the shoulder roll, which Anderson Silva was playing with. Brian Ortega almost caught Max Holloway with. You go into the shoulder roll, you have your lead arm low, so you just come back with a back elbow, and you can turn your hips into it too. Mark Hunt does that elbow where he shows the jab, they shoot, and he comes down on the back of their head. And because they're ducking in, he's like, I didn't know they were ducking in, so I can't be punished for that, even though it's very deliberate elbow down on the back of the head. Did it to Ben Rothwell loads, did it to Chris Tuchscherer. One of my favourites is the jab left hook, and then step in with the right upward elbow, which works really well in kickboxing. I think Liam Harrison did it to... Can't remember who it was, but he split them wide open. It was a great little combination. So it works really well if the guy's putting on earmuffs. You go jab, left hook around the side. Their hands either stay still or separate a little bit, but either way, you're slotting that forearm right up the centre. Hopefully slashing their nose or just inside, the nose side of each eye open. Counter elbows are tricky, but again, Nate Corbett's your man. The inside parry of the jab, so your left hand comes across and parries their left jab out and come down the center with the right elbow, is a super counter. Thomas Almeida uses that in MMA, constantly catching guys with that counter elbow. One of the nice ones you can do, you'll see guys reaching for that lace position where if the opponent jabs, you put your hand out down the inside, you put your left hand down the inside of their jab as you parry with your right, and you catch them behind the head. And guys like Boakar do a lot of kneeing from there and stuff. Lennox Lewis used to be great at grabbing behind the head, pulling down, and coming up with a huge uppercut as he stepped out to the side. But you can do that, move in a bit more and slam the elbow into their face as you do it, and then you end up with sort of reverse collar tie, whatever you want to call it, a gooseneck thing. And the spinning back elbow, while it is dangerous in MMA, if you're like Curtis Millinger and just give up your back doing it, or Uriah Hall, but if you can time it well, it's still a crazy good counter. I mean, you saw it just the other weekend, Kelvin Gastelum. Yair Rodriguez, different sort of back elbow, but it's the same thing. If you've got the guy, especially if you can convince them that they're moving into a dominant position, as that Kelvin Gastelum one was, where he's stepping down the side and he's like, oh no, and then comes around with the elbow. Those are amazing. I desperately wish we were allowed the 12 to 6 elbow on the feet, because it's a beautiful little technique. And especially into the collarbone. I love that. The Thais love that, into the collarbone. Top of the head is, it's good. If you can slash their head open, it's very good. But it's not like, you're not a baby. You're not going to be able to press in the soft spot and kill them. The collarbone elbow is a nice one, though. And I think you could see guys do that with, say out of the collar tie or whatever along the fence. If you did an upward elbow into the collarbone, that's also pretty bad. Collarbone is really not attacked as much as it probably could be, because it's pretty debilitating if you get your collarbone broken. Like even long term, Igor Zinoviev was a really hot shit until he fought Frank Shamrock. Frank Shamrock picked him up, slammed him, broke his collarbone. Zinoviev never fought again. But I think the elbows, one of the things about MMA is that ground fighting has shown you how amazing the elbow is as a weapon. The best place for elbows is still if you can convince your opponent to underhook your leg from any kind of guard. You see a lot of guys trying to go to deep half guard, and deep half guard as a position itself, I don't think is as bad for MMA as people claim. It's not. If you've got the guy loaded up and off balance and you're able to tilt him backwards and forwards, he shouldn't be able to hit you that much. The problem is guys reaching underneath their opponent, not being able to get underneath them properly, and just getting their hands stuck underneath the opponent's thigh, and just getting elbowed into a death, basically. Bigfoot Silva versus Kane, Shogun versus Jones. But you can do exactly the same thing from closed guard. It was an old Mario Sperry favourite, is how he used to set up the one-arm man pass, which is where you pass the arm under the back. He would control bicep ties or in the armpits, and then he'd lift one leg up, just to get the opponent to reach under it so that they could go into a pendulum sweep or an armbar or something. And as soon as they did, he'd drop the knee on top of it so that their hands trapped behind his sweaty ass thigh, and then he'd start passing the hand underneath. But you can do that with an elbow just as easily. Anyway, cheers, Landon. Hi, Jack. You frequently mention the double jab as a useful tool to get into range against an opponent who likes to pull their head straight back. Could you please speak a bit more about the mechanics behind this and why it works so well? Your Patreon boy, Chad. Well, Chad, Mr. Thundercock was my father. Call me Chad. Yeah, the double jab, I mention it a lot because, I mean, it doesn't really... The thing about the double jab is that you say it and people think, hard jab, and you don't really need to. Like, the double jab is basically a placeholder. If the opponent stands still, you do jab them, or you follow that jab with the right hand or whatever. But the double jab is just there so that the opponent's still moving. And if you can keep them moving backwards onto the fence or onto the ropes or whatever, if they pull their head back at the first sign of anything, the double jab is good to get you in range before you throw your right hand. Because if you throw your right hand at someone and they lean back and you are really going for them, you're going to carry yourself out of position, and they're going to either like slap you with a check hook as they're leaning back, or they'll come back with the right hand as you're recovering. The great thing about the double jab is that it puts you so that your feet are on top of them, basically. And there's a load of examples of guys leaning back and getting caught like that. Shane Burgos versus Calvin Kattar, I think, was one. Little shift step. Not a double jab, I don't think, but he convinces him that he's further out than he is, and then he actually gets on top of him before throwing the right hand. Sugar Ray Robinson wrote this about Randy Turpin. Great English fighter. Him and his brother, I think they both died. Very sad, mysterious deaths. The Weidman one is an example because it is like a flicking backhanded right hand. I mean, it doesn't matter what punches are thrown as long as you're getting the opponent to lean back and then still having something you can throw when they're in that fully leaned back position. Anytime you're leaning back into your stance, you are, I won't say putting yourself in danger, but there is a limit to how far you can lean back. And then you either have to bend off to the side and start coming back into a duck, or you have to move your feet. And it's very hard to move your feet with your head behind your feet. That's the one I always mention is Masayama, the old karateka who did a lot of fake tricks, breaking rocks and fighting bulls that weren't actually bulls, they were oxes and things like that. Just sad castrated bulls that don't actually they just want to be left alone, and Masayama's karate chopping them in the neck. One of the tricks he used to do and this one's really cool because it demonstrates a point, is firstly he was enormously strong. He was a strong man. He toured America as a strong man at one point. But he would have a guy sit in a chair and he'd say, right, lean back into the chair, and then he'd put his finger on their forehead and say, now try and stand up, and they wouldn't be able to, because when you're leaning back in the chair, you're sat in the chair relaxedly, comfortably. It's been too long since I wrote relaxedly. That's not a word. But leaning back in the chair, your head goes behind your center of gravity. You have to recover it in front of your center of gravity before you can move, or you have to get your center of gravity under it and your feet under that. So it's very hard to get back into position once you're there. I mean, you don't have to try it with one finger. You can do it with your palm. But if you've got a friend or a long-suffering wife, you can show them this. It's a cool little thing about how your center of gravity relates to your head. And if your head goes behind your center of gravity, you are not in great hitting position. You're not in great defending position. You're not really in great moving position. You're in good position if the opponent misses and you can come straight back in with the right hand, or you can just slap them with the left hook while you're leaning back. But it all relies on the opponent falling short. If you hold off before you throw your real attack, you can get them into the lean and out of position. And if you get hit in that position, it's not good. Cheers, Chad. Hey, Jack. I'm a relatively new, brackets past 3 years fan. Oh, I sense a McGregor noob, lads. Many fighters in the UFC are incredibly bland. Oh, definitely a McGregor noob. While this probably hasn't been helped by the Reebok era, I get the sense that the showmanship and presentation in MMA isn't what it used to be. Who are some of the fighters who had/have unique aesthetics and personalities, not only when it comes to in-the-ring showmanship, but also their walkouts' overall persona? Two examples that spring to mind are Genki Sudo and Sakuraba, but I'm sure there are others. As always, keep up the great work. Cheers, Jake. Shit, you just named the two that I was going to name. Yeah, Genki Sudo, obviously, especially once K1 Heroes started giving him a big budget to do his own thing. His last entrance with them, where he has the Indian Native American headdress and all the backing dancers and stuff, is incredible. The problem is that you've got to be pretty confident to do that before a fight, rather than, well, maybe he did it instead of his warm-up backstage, but he did always get horribly injured, so maybe that's part of his problem. Once you get to the highest level, it's very silly to do that sort of stuff. Like Prince Nazim used to enter on a flying carpet or whatever. His fight against Barrera got held up for 40 minutes while they were working out how to fix something to do with his entrance. Sakuraba used to do like simpler entrances, but was always fun with it. My boy Filthy Tom Lawler used to do very interesting entrances and weigh-in stuff at the UFC events, but they sort of neutered his ability to do that with Reebok. Firstly, the Reebok thing was just a cash grab. They were like, hey, $7 million quickly. We like that. Also, Reebok, fairly legitimate name. And it did look a bit bad having guys like Condom Depot and Max Guns or whatever on the back of people's shorts. Dude wipes. But it also prevented dudes from Dennis Hallman turning up in those Superman trunks and then his balls popped out while he was fighting. If you want to go watch that, watch that. And he beat Matt Hughes twice, which is just insane to think about. I suppose it's a kind of a gift that they've done that and stopped dudes wearing Speedos. I mean, Manoa Man wears quite tasteful Speedos. Actually, Manoa Man's a great example for you if you want gimmicky bullshit in the ring. Manoa Man he could have been a decent light heavyweight or middleweight. He did okay against Quinton Jackson. He always did okay against guys in the division that he chose to fight in. And he probably could have gone down a division as well. The problem was that he decided to be like full gimmick and just fought giants for the rest of his career. So they'd find huge Korean fatties with no MMA fights and they'd have him fight them. And sometimes they'd just crush him. And other times he'd hit a hip throw on Zuluzinho or something like that. You know, Giant Silver, he also fought. Basically, he did this thing where he'd come out bouncing and then he'd do a forward roll and come up into a double leg. And it worked. I'm going to say a surprising number of times, but I think it's only like one or two. But that's still a surprising number of times. He beat Giant Silver by barrel rolling into a takedown. And he had good leg attacks too. Was a bit of a dick. They gave him some young middleweight lad, and he did like a lateral knee bar, they called it, where he just like turned his knee sideways. It was absolutely revolting. But then Sakuraba tore his arm off, and that was great fun. Trying to think of other characters. Minoru Suzuki in Pancrase was great, because he had this like wrestling heel persona, and he carried it over into Pancrase. He if you ever saw Taz in the WWF, he basically just stole Minoru Suzuki's gimmick of wearing the towel over his head and coming out leering and stuff. But Minoru Suzuki, I've written 2 pieces about him for Fightland. He's so much fun to watch in the ring, because he really did have this like sadistic style where he'd knee ride people on the neck and then, you know, follow them through rolls into Kimuras and shit. And always smiling at the camera. Bas Rutten kneed him in the head illegally on the ground, and he said, "Nah, it's fine," and then immediately headbutted him and changed position. He's just a really fun character. A lot of these are going to be Japanese, sorry. Wiki Akio used to be fun back in the day, mainly because he was an artist as well as an MMA fighter, like a painter, that is. And he designed his own shorts and always did his hair the same as his shorts. And he had mad knockout power too. He was just kind of clumsy. Hideo Tokoro, I mean, he sucked as a striker, but he was a really interesting grappler. And he was working as a school caretaker, janitor, whatever you want to call it, until he knocked out the best featherweight in the world. Pequeno, Alexandra Franca Nogueira, the guy who was the best before Aldo. And Tokoro took a fight with him and knocked him out of nowhere with a back fist and became like the number 1 featherweight in the world for a little while. Hayato Sakurai is one of my favourites because he used to do cartwheel passes and all sorts of stuff, like no hands cartwheel, so basically a round off or a flip or whatever. So good. Was pound for pound number 1 in the world for a little while, but no one really knew who he was. But he could do everything. He had his first career and then he sort of dropped off a bit. Then he cut to lightweight, went to work with Matt Hume, came back as like the prototype of DJ, and did well as the lightweight too. And also got silver in the absolute in Abu Dhabi, which is insane. You might like Tim Elliott, actually. He's got a really weird style. If you watch his fights in Titan, whatever it is, Titan FC, he had 2 title fights there, and he just throws exclusively inside low kicks and spinning back fists because his grappling is so good that he doesn't mind if guys like jump on his back. Having said that, Ben Wynn beat him by jumping on his back and choking him. So, yeah. Anyway, cheers, Jake. Right, I reckon that'll do us for this week. I'm going to be back on Monday. If you want to listen to the brand new Boxer Rebellion History episode or the upcoming Muhammad Ali and Dream Lightweight Grand Prix episodes, sign up on the Patreon. Also allows me to do these podcasts every week, twice a week when there's 2 events. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. If you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. Oh, and if you're a fan of the history shit I do, a few months ago I researched and wrote a lengthy piece on the Queensberry rules, touching on the Queensberry family, the relationship with Oscar Wilde. You know, they were called the Mad Bad Line, how Old Q made his money horse racing and things like that. It was a bloody fun piece to write. I think it came out well. and you can read that in Battles of London, Volume 2 or Issue 2. Google Battles of London, buy the magazine. It's good, and there's other good people in it. And, yeah, that's all the plugs I ever need to do, I think. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Secret Filipino kickboxing techniques bless.